let's start. So today we are going to do a growth case, if that's okay.
Yeah,
And
sounds good.
the problem for the case statement for today is that Nokia is looking to expand the revenue. So we need you as a consultant to help them identify how they are going to fulfill this objective.
Understood. Thank you for sharing the problem statement. I'll just reiterate my understanding so that we're aligned. Nokia, the global telecom giant, is looking to expand their revenues, and they want me as a consultant to advise them on how they can achieve this. Is that correct?
Correct.
Is it all right if I take a moment to ask some clarifying questions to better understand our situations?
Sure, go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you. So I'll base my questions around four major buckets. I would like to know more about the company, the product, the market that we operate in, and finally the problem itself on what is our quantum and what exactly are we chasing. Should I start with my questions about the company?
Yeah, that sounds perfect.
So Nokia is a global giant. I'm aware that they have three broad business units, which would be network infrastructure, mobile infrastructure, and the portfolio businesses that they might invest in. Is my understanding correct? Or if not, can you give me a brief on how the business is structured and what are the major segments for our client?
Yeah, more or less that's correct. Nokia particularly has these three broad revenue segments.
Understood. So just reiterating, network infrastructure, mobile infrastructure, and portfolio. Perfect. And for the purpose of this case, do you want me to think about growth in one particular segment or should we keep a holistic view?
So for this particular case, we would like to focus more on network and the mobile segment of it, not much on the portfolio because that is kind of a segment which will like grow and it's not related to the core business that much.
Perfect. Sounds good. And given the vast majority, given that we operate with very vast geographical reach, do you want me to focus in a particular geography or are we looking global expansion?
So we are actually looking at a global expansion, but more so focused on the South Asian countries.
Understood. And yeah, that makes sense because currently the Southeast Asian market is the fastest growing in the telecom sector. And what would be the primary customer base for us? Are we more focused on the B2B side, or are we looking also to make a comeback into the B2C or the retail segment here?
Yeah, so we'll stay more focused on the B2B. So as you know, we exited the B2C segment and not looking much to enter again over there for now.
Understood. Yeah, that's very helpful, and it gives me a basic understanding of Nokia, the kind and focus. I'd like to know bit more about our product. So, given the vast variety of our offerings, is there a particular product class that we should focus on? And given that if we already discussed network and mobile infrastructure, should I keep a holistic view, or is there a particular class that you want me to look at?
So you can keep a holistic view, like we are looking to gain revenue and we are okay from wherever it comes.
Perfect. Do our products have any competitive edge that makes us stand out from our competitors?
So I would say that since Nokia is the market leader, that gives us a certain edge as we have like contracts with almost all the tier one companies in the different tier one cities of different countries. So that is a particularly a edge for us.
Understood. So our edge would be that we have contracts with almost all tier one companies in the major tier one cities across the globe. Do we have any edge when it comes to our servicing as well, given churn or customer retention is a major problem in the telecom industry?
So yeah, that's correctly identified. Churn is a major issue, but we are addressing it by focusing a higher emphasis on customer success managers, and we try to provide our clients with the best service. So that is the edge for us.
Understood. That's very helpful to know. Now, finally, about the market as well. Can you tell me a bit more about the market landscape in the telecom industry in these countries? Is the market consolidating? Are we losing share, or are we looking for general organic growth?
So we are looking for general organic growth, and particularly if you talk about the network infrastructure, so we are actually seeing a double-digit growth in that particular segment. And whereas for the mobile networks, so there is growth in that segment, but in the late single digits.
Understood. So we are looking to capitalize on this already existing momentum in the network infrastructure market. That's
Yes.
very helpful to know. Can you tell me a bit more about should I benchmark the industry against the current AI boom, or are we playing in the more mature 5G market?
So we are playing in the more mature 5G market, but also like we would like to capture any momentum which we can get from the AI boom which is happening at the same time.
Understood. Very helpful to know. And do you have any information if we have tried a similar expansion recently, or is this our first try aim, first attempt at such an expansion?
So with the AI boom, you know how quickly like things are changing. So I would say this is a completely new kind of expansion which you're looking at.
Makes sense. Thank you so much for answering all those. Now, as a final step, I would like to set up a boundary around the case problem, define the quantum that we're chasing so that I'm able to solve better. So, is there a quantitative goal, a specific target that we're chasing over the next 5 years?
Yes, so we are looking at a revenue increase of about 30% over the next 5 years.
Increase of around 30%. And the time horizon, as we've already said, is around 5 years.
Yes.
Are there any constraints, be it operational, financial, or are there any strategic no-go zones that we are avoiding?
So no constraints as such, but as I already mentioned, we are looking to focus on the B2B business. So yeah, that is the constraint.
Understood. And since you mentioned revenue, is it safe for me to assume that our priority is to focus on the top line revenue growth while paying less attention to the profit margin, or is that also important?
No, you can just focus on the top line growth for now.
Understood. That's really helpful to know. Thank you so much for answering all these questions. Great help. Is it all right if I take a moment to come up with a framework for my analysis?
Yeah, yeah, go ahead, take your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much for waiting. So, to start with the analysis, given that Nokia is a giant with deep pockets, do you want me to focus more on organic path of development or organic path of growth, or do you want me to think about inorganic growth as well at this point?
Let's keep our focus on the organic part for now.
Perfect. So I think as a next step, it's helpful for us to think in alongside mathematical levels and try to decompose the revenue. So revenue here would essentially be a function of the active users that we have times the average revenue we can derive per user. And active users we can further divide into the new users that we're able to acquire minus any churned users that leave our company. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, makes sense.
Perfect. And the ARPU here would be the average annual revenue per active customer. And
Okay.
I'd also like to point out here that throughout my analysis, given the recent boom and the potential impact that AI can have on this industry, I would like to keep this in mind throughout my case. Does that make sense? Should I proceed?
Yeah, yeah, that's fair.
Perfect. Thank you so much for setting the base for me. So what I think is would be helpful for me next is think about how we can grow the active user base, and B, minimize the churn. Is it all right if I take a moment to come up with an approach on how we can do that?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you. So as I've already mentioned, uh, given that we're trying to grow our existing customer base, for that, I would like to think about four major buckets here. I would like to discuss our penetration, if we can increase our penetration to onboard more customers. If we second would be product development, if we can develop our products better or develop new products that can serve the market. Third would be market development, if we can think about expanding into newer markets while delivering the same products. And finally, diversification, which would be we'd come up with new products in newer markets to completely expand our horizons. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, makes sense. So this is for new user acquisition, right?
Or new user acquisition.
Okay.
Correct. So should I start with what ideas I have for the penetration in the telecom industry in the Southeast Asian market?
Yeah, let's start with penetration and go one by one from there.
So we've already discussed in the case that we have contracts with major tier one companies in tier one cities across Southeast Asia. The first point we can think about is acquiring contracts with the remaining tier two and tier three telecom operators for fixed networks, especially within tier two and tier three cities within Southeast Asia. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense.
The pathway we can follow for this is that we go by we leverage our already existing capabilities, already existing name with tier one companies, and then have them introduce us to the new users and game past that. Does that make sense?
Okay, so you are basically like planning like a collaboration between the local players in the markets of tier two
Correctly.
and tier three cities.
Correct. Leveraging our
Oh,
existing IP there.
okay,
Second
okay.
point that I can come up with is that in the recent years there has been uproar in the industry wherein mostly governments have uh, asked all the telecom operators to cut their contacts with players like Chinese-backed players like Huawei and Ericsson and think about moving to different Western players. Given that Nokia is a Western company, we can think about replacing restricted vendors in Europe, in Southeast Asia, especially countries like India and Japan, and think about acquiring those contracts as well. This will give us leeway with already existing large customers. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, sounds like a good idea.
And finally, we can think about using AI-based network benchmarking to win competitive replacement deals. And this is a particularly good idea, especially in the telecom industry, because usually we have to compete with other players to win bids. If we can leverage our existing AI capabilities or develop new AI capabilities to win those bids, it makes it very easy for us to acquire new customers. Does it? So these 3 points, do they make sense for penetration? Do you want me to go deeper into one of those or move to product development?
Yeah, sounds good. So I think you can go a bit deeper into the AI-based network performance benchmarking point. So as to like how would you use AI technologies to win competitive replacement deals over here?
Yeah. So a particular challenge, especially in the tier 2 and 3 cities, is localization or network design. At the moment, we have to deploy, from my understanding, we have to deploy local talent into the industry, and they have to develop the network design themselves, given that local uh, pathways or local networks are usually complex. If we can leverage AI to make those designs for us, that automatically cuts the time down on the contract proposal time, and then we can onboard more and more customers since that time is now cut down. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sounds good. Let's move on to product development.
Perfect. So product development, another recent shift that's happened is that private players are now moving from LAN-based secure networks to wireless networks, wireless secure networks. What we can leverage, given that we already have so much capabilities in this sector, we can offer them plug-and-play private wireless solutions for mid-sized enterprises. So, and these will only be used by authorized devices. So we're offering them A, the trusted name of Nokia, B, the security of a secure network, of an authorized only network, and finally the flexibility of a wireless network as well. This can help us develop new products for them and easily win those customers over. The second point I
Okay,
have for
so yeah, so before we go on to the second one, so like there would already be existing players which make the wireless components, right? So how do you think of tackling that competition in the market?
So these type of services, these solutions are usually adopted by players for which security needs are very high. This would be local banking networks, energy exchanges. They need a trusted name. Usually, they prefer a trusted name. A, we can win because we have a very high uh, brand credibility in the market. And secondly, our wireless network is one of the widest in the world. We can reach the places where no other local operators can. This can help us win here.
Makes sense. Yeah, we can move ahead to the next point.
The second point I have would be fast tracking 6G development. Nokia is working on it, and also a lot of Chinese players are also working on 6G developments. If we can fast track this development, we can build a lot of mobile infrastructure, a lot of radio network players very easily, especially in the Southeast Asian market. It's usually price competitive. Does that make sense?
Yeah, let's move to the next one.
And finally, we can think about tapping into the regional rural broadband market. If we can offer maybe less specialized, more general services to regional internet service providers and rural broadbands at a cheaper prices, we can tap into a very large market with a large customer base. And given that we already have cost efficiencies in this market, this should be achievable as well. Does that make sense?
Okay, so you believe that Nokia would have the cost efficiencies to beat the local players at their pricing and come up with cheaper pricing in the segment, in the rural part.
Given
Because
that
it's a very price competitive market, I feel, over there.
it is a price competitive market, but given that we have already acquired rights to most fiber optic cables or submarine cables, it's easier for us to set up and offer cheaper services to them. On the other hand, local players, they have to buy services from large players like Huawei or Nokia. So we can cut out the middleman and operate directly there.
Sounds good.
Perfect. The third bucket that I discussed was market development. So here we think about selling the existing products in newer markets. So we already discussed we can expand geographically into countries in Southeast Asia and Africa, even Latin America that we have not covered so far, that we already don't exist in. Second point here would be that we can think about entry into industries that we have not catered to so far. Contracts with governments, defense, state-owned utilities. So most countries in the Southeast Asian market follow a federal structure where there are separate central contracts and separate state-owned contracts. We can think about making contracts with the state-owned entities. This way, let's say in a country like India where there are 28 different states, we can have multiple different contracts with them. These are usually very large term, very low chances of churn, since these are very large term and governments don't easily make changes. And we can have a very large customer base here as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. So before proceeding further ahead, so I would like to know, as you mentioned, we can look at a geographic expansion into different South Asian countries. So
Yeah.
is there a broad level framework which you would use in order to select which particular South Asian countries to focus on first and then like move to the next ones? Like a very high level overview of that.
That's a good question. Is it all right if I take a moment to come up with a framework for it?
Yeah, sure, sure. Take your time.
Perfect. So I'll just lay down a broad level overview on how I would go about selecting a country. I would look at majorly four areas. I would look at the market attractiveness, which would include the market size, the CAGR, and how the market is generally performing. Then I would look at the financial feasibility. What would be our expected revenues? What would be our break-even point? What is the fixed cost that we have to incur, which is non-recoverable? If this makes sense, I would move on to operational feasibility. Can we feasibly establish a supply chain in this economy? Are the factors feasible? Is the talent available? Is the material available? And if everything checks out, finally, I would take a look at the entry and exit risks. How easy it is to enter the market. What is the government conducive? What are the laws that they have? And if we were to exit the market someday, how easy it is to sell off and move out of the market. So this would be a framework for choosing a market. Does it make sense to you?
Yeah, that sounds pretty comprehensive. Yeah, let's move on to the next bucket.
Perfect. And the last bucket that I would have for us would be diversification. In this, we essentially choose to try to expand our horizons, to think about new products and new markets. And the first recommendation I have for our client here would be to move into critical infrastructure customers that we're offering general solutions to them right now, but we specialize. We offer niche, specially designed solutions to them. For example, we move to railway, we move to energy grids. Railway follow a particular system for their booking, tracking, and the overall management of the systems. If we can help them with that, if we can use our own Internet of Things capabilities to serve them, it can serve as a very good it can build our capabilities and serve as a very good long-term customer for us. And there are more examples of this as well. Be it energy grids, data centers that are coming up, they can be a very big customer base for us. And finally, given that these are mission critical infrastructures, failure usually comes at a very large cost. So maybe we can think about predictive monitoring or reliability monitoring as a prerequisite. So we already offer them benchmarking or predictive maintenance for all the services, and if they were to fail, we help them early on. This would be my recommendation for diversification as well. Does this make sense?
Yeah, sounds good.
So this helps us acquire new users. The second facet of our analysis would be how we can manage retention and reduce the churn rate. So usually, broadly, I have four buckets for it. Number one, I would look at longer contracts with auto renewals. We would enter contracts in the long term, maybe 5 to 10 years, and include clauses with auto renewal. So if the services meet the level that they expect, if the services we provide meet their expectations, the contract would be auto renewed without any intervention. The clauses would update themselves. Secondly, we try to embed Nokia ecosystem deeply into their operations. An Internet of Things wherein everything is Nokia. So it provides two benefits. A, the ecosystem is more efficient. They are able to use it better. And B, it becomes harder for us to replace Nokia, for them to replace Nokia. And B, we stick with them so that we essentially stick with them for a long time. We also make sure that we have a high reliability service assurance and customer success teams. We have already mentioned that we provide very good service to them and we usually focus a lot more on customer success. If we have dedicated teams that are used to specialized systems, for example, we discussed that we move into railway, a niche industry. A team that's familiar with the railway system would be a very good help to them. So we make assured, specialized customer success teams for them. And finally, predictive churn and failure analytics. If a client is already high risk, let's say in a region where internet failures or network failures are very common, we make sure that we monitor them very closely. We're using AI to predict any failures and we avoid that failure overall so that we can retain them in the long run. Does this make sense for churn reduction and retention?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Perfect. So
Let's
that
move let's
was
move at looking at how would you increase revenue per customer.
perfect. Is it all right to take a moment for this as well?
Yeah, go ahead.
Brilliant. Thank you. So again, I would look at this through four buckets. Namely, these would be pricing, cross-selling or upselling, channel monetization, or lifetime value expansion, essentially the overall value that we can derive from a customer. Is it all right for me to start with pricing?
Yeah, okay.
So within pricing, I have four recommendations. We can think about premium pricing for mission critical networks. For example, if a company needs very critical infrastructure, they just cannot fail. We offer them premium pricing and provide more protection to them. We can think about outcome-based pricing. If uptime is important for a customer or latency is important, we charge them more for uptime or latency. Selective pricing. We think about price escalators in multi-year contracts. Given that with the introduction of AI, component prices are rising very rapidly. RAM has gotten very expensive. Chipsets have gotten more expensive in the recent years. So we have escalators in a multi-year contract that with the rises in market pricing, with the rises in market prices, the contract price would also rise. And finally, AI verified performance measurement. Any performance measurement that we do will be verified through AI to support outcome-based pricing. So if latency is important, we verify that latency through AI to make sure that we're able to derive maximum pricing from one customer. Does this make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. Let's look at the other aspects now.
The next aspect is cross-selling or upselling. So if you're already selling them hardware, we think about selling software to them, upgrading that software. If you're already selling them software as well, we think about orchestration and analytics layer. Essentially, as I mentioned earlier, make an entire layer of Nokia ecosystem. If we're selling them one-time sales, maybe we think about multi-year sales contract. We train our sales staff in such a way that we are able to enter multi-year sales contract with them, service contracts with them, and also offer them other services. And finally, AI-driven identification of upsell and process opportunities. Given that our product base or our product offerings are very vast and our sales team is scattered across the globe, we use AI to identify new opportunities where we can upsell to a customer. If the customer is buying, let's say, optical cable network, we use AI to see what other services they can offer so that we have a ready catalog to supply to them, and it makes us easier for us to cross sell. Does this make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense.
Perfect. Then is it all right to move to the next aspect, which is channel monetization?
Yeah, we can look at that.
So first point here would be enterprise-wide contracts versus site-level deals. If we are operating for only one site with a customer, can we enter into enterprise-wide contracts with them? Can we expand the base in which we are operating? Do we enter with government frameworks, agreement building services? So government usually have larger bids. They have local pairs. Is there any way for us to monetize that channel and sell to governments directly or sell to governments for a longer term via long-term services? Do we bundle services for governments differently? Let's say for an enterprise, if we're selling optical cable networks plus a fiber cable network, we can bundle that and sell that to a government, and maybe then they can provide it to the customer. Does it make sense?
So that possibility is not there over here because most of the governments have like different tender processes, tender bidding processes for most of their contracts. So it's not possible to like cross-sell to them like and bundle different products at the same time as we would do with our other enterprise customers. So let's eliminate that particular thing for
Understood.
that.
Thank you so much for letting me know. And finally, for lifetime value expansion, which is the last bucket, managed services is very important. We've already discussed the possibility of having a customer success manager. But if we move into niche industries like railways or energy, a customer success manager who's very familiar with that industry, who knows the industry in and out, would be very useful for the customer, and we're able to retain them longer as well. We can think about multi-renewables, and finally AI-enabled automation improving services quality and renewal likelihood. If they have AI automation in their operations and we are selling AI automation to them as well, that means it's likelier that they will renew with us. And governments usually stick for a long time, even enterprises stick for a long time. So AI can also help us derive maximum value over the lifetime of a customer cycle. Does this make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. Okay, so I think we can go over the risks involved in all these categories briefly once, and then you can come up with like your top recommendations of how you would like to, proceed with the overall strategy for Nokia.
Sounds good. Should I start with the risk first? Take a moment to come up with the risks.
Yeah, yeah, let's do that.
Brilliant. I'll just take a moment if all right.
Sure.
So I can think of five major risk categories that we might have to come up. And I also try to think of strategies that can help us mitigate those risks. The first would be market and demand risk. Second would be competitive risk. Third is technological risks. Fourth is regulatory risk. And finally, financial and portfolio risks. Should I start with the market and demand risks?
Yeah, we can start.
I think the most major threat here would be delayed enterprise adoption of private 5G or 6G networks or even AI adoption. Second would be budget constraints in government public sector customers. So for mitigating these risks, we can think about prioritizing enterprise and private business wireless segments with shorter payback cycles, where the turnaround is quick. For example, banking is an industry where they need this enterprises quickly, they need them quick, and they tend to enter short-term contracts. So in the recent years, in the first few years, we can think about uh, catering to them first. For the second risk, we can
So you're
diversify
looking
across
at like
geography.
private banks instead of like
Sorry,
public sector banks. So you would be
both.
looking at private banks, okay,
Yeah,
instead
they
of
tend to
public
have
sector.
shorter
Got it.
turnaround cycles.
Okay,
And secondly, to mitigate the risk of budget constraints in government and public sectors, we can diversify across geographies to reduce single market exposure. Does it make sense? Should I
okay,
move to
sounds good.
competitive?
Yeah, yeah,
So a major risk here could be aggressive pricing by Ericsson, Samsung, or Chinese vendors in unconstrained markets. Let's say a market like Vietnam or Cambodia, where they're not restricted. We can mitigate this by focus on trust vendor geographies and regulated markets. So we would rather, in the early years, let's not enter a market like Vietnam, which is unconstrained, or rather operate in a market like India, which is very highly constrained, so that we are able to leverage our trust better. Another risk here is rapid innovation cycles, eroding product differentiation. Given that products are developing very quickly, they're evolving very quickly, we differentiate through reliability, security, and end-to-end offerings instead of a quick new product. Does this make sense?
makes sense.
Thirdly, technology and execution risk. So there is a native inherent complexity in deploying AI-enabled and cloud-native networks. There is also a talent gap in AI, cloud, and software engineering. So the way to mitigate this would be phased rollouts. We have clear MVP milestones wherein we make sure that we are able to communicate to the client what is important, and then we do it in phases so that the operational complexity does not become a major challenge. We also do targeted hiring and partnerships with hyperscalers or integrators. We hire the best talent that is able to fast track this development or this execution of our projects. Does this make sense?
Yeah, sounds good.
For customers and retention risk, the major problem is high switching incentives of competitors. If a Chinese competitor is able to offer better incentive to a customer, that becomes a problem for us. So this way to physics would be proactive service assurance and predictive maintenance. We already discussed we would offer them predictive maintenance services. And if we are able to proactively assure them of the services, the customer success manager is able to cater to their every need at whenever they need it. This helps us eliminate this risk as well. Does this make sense?
Yeah, yeah, we already covered this one. Yeah, let's quickly look at the regulatory and financial risks, and then we can move on
Yeah.
to this
So regulatory risk
recommendations.
could be export controls and trade restrictions. Given the recent uproar in the US geo space, wherein Donald Trump is putting embargoes on all the economies, major risk would be over in export controls and trade restrictions. And also another problem here is data sovereignty and security requirements. So ways to mitigate this would be localized manufacturing, partnerships and compliance framework, so that if we are doing direct FDI into different geographies, it becomes harder for them to push us up. This helps us mitigate it. And finally, with data sovereignty and security, we do modular network architectures that is very adaptable to the local regulations. Each country has their own set of data laws, and we make sure that before investing in those countries, we're able to adapt to them in the initial few years as well. Only. Does it make sense?
Okay, so for like data privacy laws, how would you particularly tackle the challenge that some countries would want their data to be stored at their own geographical location instead of not allowing export like to Nokia to like the US to store the data? So how would you handle that?
So to deal with this, again, Nokia is very well positioned to deal with this. A, we already have geographical presence in most countries. Secondly, we have the pockets to invest into each country. If a country, let's say India wants the data to be stored locally, domestically within the country, we have the capability to build a local data center. And with our existing trust, if we ever need to exit the Indian market, we can also sell off those data centers. So this doesn't become a major challenge for us. Does this make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
These were my risks. Should I move on to the final recommendations as you asked earlier?
Yeah, yeah, let's quickly look at the final recommendations based on the risks we discussed.
So I'll base my recommendations around two levers, namely they're going to be the impact and the feasibility. Is it all right to come up with a priority of my recommendations? Take a moment to
Yeah,
do
that
that.
sounds good. Yeah.
Sure, thank you. So given the two levels, which is impact and feasibility, I have divided my recommendations into three priority levels. Priority one, which would be prioritizing 6G rollout, given that the market is moving very fast, our competitors are making strides in this space. We need to fast track 6G development and make sure we can offer these on a larger scale. Second point in the priority one would be making sure that we are able to get government contracts very soon, especially in trusted regions. For example, if we have central contracts in a region, central government contracts, we think about moving to state government contracts. This makes sure that we have a long-term client that's also paying us super well. And the priority two, which we will build over the next 12 to 36 months, we think about outcome-based pricing, which we may not be offering currently, and entering into mission critical industries. We need to build some expertise before we enter mission critical industries. So we do that over the next 12 to 36 months, and then we enter those industries. Priority three would be selective option-led bets that we might or may need to do. So AI-led automation beyond our core offerings that we discussed earlier for some special enterprise clients could be priority three. We are working on it. We're working on it on the side, but it's not a primary focus. So do my recommendations make sense on the larger scale?
Got it. Yeah, that's a very good way to put it. So I think, yeah, it was a pretty comprehensive discussion on how we can look at the different revenue segments of Nokia holistically to come up with the revenue increase strategy over the period of next 5 years. And yeah, we can close the case. Before we close the call, I would just like to maybe take some time and think of some of the key things which we should keep in mind for our viewers if if they are actually doing a growth case. So do you want to like add some suggestions to like what things should people keep in mind if they are like solving a growth case?
Yeah, I think the first advice would be that a growth case can be very fast, very vast. You can move into a lot of different directions. So it's important that you set up boundaries early on. You discuss the quantum that is expected, you discuss the time frame, you discuss what's important for a client early on in the case, in the preliminary questions as well, so that you don't move in unnecessary directions. Second one would be a lot of people tend to follow frameworks directly from the casebooks. Though the casebooks are very comprehensive, it's important that you modify those frameworks. You add some words that are your own, so that you can able to differentiate yourself from the crowd.
Yeah, so adding on to that, as just like Gautam mentioned, growth cases have like a lot of areas. You look at the answer of matrix, and then you also look at different segments where you are like over here we like looked at reducing churn and also increasing the revenue per customer. So there are a lot of points in these segments. So it's also very good if you like focus on communicating the breadth to the interviewer first, because the interviewer might not in all the cases be interested in all the areas in which you would like to cover. So again, yeah, that was one thing. And the other thing is that the clarifying questions also become very important, because if you miss a question what is the timeline for this particular case, so the objectives could vary very vastly for that. Like for example, if it's like a more of a short term thing and you didn't ask that, so the whole objective and the way you're thinking about proceeding with it could differ, and you could not be on the same page with the interviewer. So that is also one thing. And yeah, so I think, yeah, those are some suggestions which you should keep in mind from my end. And yeah, I hope this video was helpful to our viewers and everyone, and you got something to learn from it.